Welcome back to the Wizard Weekly, where we talk about everything in gaming. My voice is back to normal. The people at Nintendo have been some naughty boys and girls this year, but instead of, getting cold this holiday season, the universe is funny in a way that they just give Nintendo exactly what they've been dishing out, and that is just controversy in, the worst fucking infringement cases. Right now, almost everyone and their uninformed internet friend is going crazy on every social platform due to the fact that Black Myth Wukong, which was, obviously critically acclaimed third-person RPG title that came out earlier in the year, it has an obvious just fake ripoff on the Nintendo Switch eShop platform that's getting a lot of attention for some odd reason. And the reason I say almost everyone is getting, fucked in the mind over this is because any Nintendo Switch fan that's had a, Switch for the last now until like 2017 is basically like that James Franco meme, and the fact that you're just like, is this your first time? Now I get it at face value. What this game is trying to be sparks an emotional reaction, from the name Wukong sung Black Legend to the more than likely AI generated freaking title cover, all the way to finally seeing the screenshots to the game being obviously a side scroller title that has damn near nothing to do with, what it's trying to rip off. This is just your basic Temu AliExpress gift that your grandma wouldn't know better to not get. But the reason this is a talking point for a lot of gamers right now is because people are finally being, open-eyed to what is going on in the Nintendo eShop, and the fact that there has just been a plague of all these damn near Google Play Store type of games, and the fact that you'll find any kind of game of whether it's like a knockoff like Wukong Sun, obvious AI generated bullshit like these Aldora games, which is like the most controversial of these titles, like you can see here, Genie of the Wonderful, freaking Bambi, Winnie the Pooh, taking advantage of all the IPs that are public domain now. It is a real plague that is on the Nintendo Switch that I think is the low point of this current generation of Nintendo consoles, because compared to the 3DS and Wii U eShop, Nintendo had a very strict online marketplace, which they got a lot of criticism for. So when the Switch came around, they wanted to open up to make sure that there was equal competition for all publishers and developers to be able to get a game on the Switch, which unfortunately once they spread that floodgate all the way open, they just let in any and everything, and we see this type of shit all too often. And the fucked up thing about it is Nintendo's eShop algorithm, if you could call it that, it's really flawed in the fact that it shows always what games are on sale. So these publishers and developers with these whack games, they always put them on sale to put them in the front. They always show the newest stuff. That's why they're always pumping these games out, so that they're always on the forefront. And it is nothing new for Wukong Sun, which I hope in this next Nintendo generation that they crack down on putting some sort of like verification of the type of games that they, even though I'm sure that there's some sort of legal gymnastic that the people that make these games are going through. Like I said, they're using public domain IPs, so they can't get them on that. But either way, this obvious knockoff game comes out on the 26th of this month, and I was gonna buy it just for the meme of it and to come on here and fuck around. But I just think that would be disrespectful to each of the individual 799 pennies that it would take to buy this game. Like I just could not disrespect my hard-earned currency like that. Moving on, I'm sure anyone that cares have long since forgot about the 2017 release game of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, released in its base form of being a lackluster title compared to its predecessors and having just a really weird presentation. Like I can see here, the art style was definitely like taken to a Jump Force type of thing going on here. The character selection felt lacking, and then they decided to introduce a bunch more characters through paid DLC, which isn't fun for anyone. It's just another write-off title from the yesteryear that had potential but didn't live up to it. But fortunately, in the past couple of days, the game has found a resurgence in the hands of modders, since they decided to take the game and create this mod called Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and Beyond. If I could learn how to use the damn screen. And this free mod that lists past what you would traditionally think of when you think of like, a game mod you would download from Nexus or something. This adds just a bunch of new characters, original voice acting, a bunch of new game modes, and they changed the presentation to the, classic art style of Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now it seems like every generation of gaming has grown with some sort of form of Marvel vs. Capcom, whether it's the first one on the, original PlayStation or, the more critically acclaimed 2. I personally grew up with the 2011 title Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and this art style is directly taking from that title that I played in my childhood a lot. Not just that, but the fact that they added characters that weren't in the game somehow, like Dante. The team behind this mod claimed that this was a studio level passion project that took a lot of effort and obvious animation and voice acting finding. It is just an amazing thing that people can have access to this for free, and the effect that this mod has had on the title is nothing less than apparent, because the 24-hour peak of players is at 659 and the all-time peak is at 3,600. 1,500. But in the last week, the peak players that we've had is at over 1,300. And you can see from the last 6 years, that is the highest player base that we've had in a long ass time. And it once again reinforces the idea that the community overall has the last standing hand on how a game turns out, no matter how the publishers, the developers decide to treat a game. The first thing I thought about when I saw this is the fact that Capcom last year, they made some statements claiming how they thought that mods were just offensive and aren't really good to games and they go against their morals. Now again, this was during the time where Naked Chun-Li was doing its rounds on the internet, and Capcom was going crazy over that, rightfully so. But even still, if I wanted to see Naked Chun-Li in my single player game, let me do that. Let me be a gooner in peace. But where the only times I think they could step in is where it goes online, when people were taking those mods online, because there could potentially be a younger person playing that title, and that's when it gets weird. But single player, all hands off the board on that, Capcom. Like, what do you mean? So overall, I'm interested to see how Capcom responds to this mod being received so well, if they respond at all. It is gonna be sort of like some cease and desist, like how they do with like certain Skyrim mods and shit. I don't think that even if they do that, there's not gonna be any lasting effects, since the game is already in the hands of the public. So someone out there will be able to keep updates on and redistribute the downloads if the worst comes to worst. But even still, really cool shit to see. And yeah, and moving on, we've sort of reached a renaissance era when it comes to remade horror titles and just their amazing execution, most notably the Resident Evil series that's been going crazy these last couple of years. But one of these titles that we like to see more of, both in new iterations and in remade fashion, is the Dead Space series that we got a beautiful new remade rendition of last year that performed incredibly well. But that remake was over the original 2008 title. The last time that we got a Dead Space game in general was in 2013 with what you can see here, Dead Space 3. But unfortunately, in contrast to what players have been wanting for a long ass time, it seems that we won't get a Dead Space 4 anytime soon, since apparently the creator of the Dead Space franchise, Glen Scholfield, he went to EA proposing the idea, but unfortunately, to his words, got turned down. When speaking to the Dan Allen Gaming podcast, he claimed that Dead Space 4, they said no. We're talking this year, we didn't go deep, they just said we're not interested right now, we appreciate it, blah blah blah. So we didn't have to take it any further, and they know their numbers and what they have to ship, which I'm guessing they're responding to how the AAA gaming industry, they have to have specific games that they know will return a profit, since making a AAA title in modern times is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, unfortunately. Now, Scholfield, a veteran in the industry, he's obviously had his hands in many other really dope ass franchises, most notably the Callisto Protocol, which is a horror type game that came out a couple of years ago that takes inspiration from the Dead Space titles. But after he left that team when the game finally shipped, he's been working on his own smaller scale funded project that's been in the works for a while, and we're gonna wait and see what it's gonna turn out to be. And the same can be said for all the people that originally worked on the Dead Space franchise, because the creative director, he's worked with Dan Houser, the co-creator of Grand Theft Auto, and his new studio. So every major developer from the 2000s and 90s, they're off making their own things and going away from the AAA section of the industry, at least for the most part, since they have enough experience to do so, and they want their own freedom and their own games now. And with that being the case, I am happy for these people, since they created a lot of fond memories in my childhood, and now they're off doing their own thing. But obviously the fan of me is a little sad that we might not see a new Dead Space game, but I still do feel like it's way likely that we're going to see another Dead Space remake, like Dead Space 2 remake, since the first one performed pretty decently. And lastly, combined with the fact that we're all getting older and the things that we grew up with are getting outdated, plus digital media being the worst thing ever, and the fact that there's no guarantee that anything can be removed at any point in time off all digital platforms, Warner Bros. Today they announced that they're delisting a bunch of Cartoon Network games from older years, and for no real reason. Now apparently right now these games include 𝐂𝐀𝐒, Samurai Jack, 2 Steam Universe games, and then 2 Adventure Time games. And I'm assuming that most of these games, that if you own them, you can still play them, since most of them are offline already. But when you try to buy them now, they have this notice that says Adventure Time Finn and Jake's Quest is no longer available on the Steam store. And it fucking sucks, man. Now, we're not going to go into the whole rabbit hole of Warner Bros. And their company and how they're handling their freaking subscription service and all the TV shows that just you can't get anywhere on their platforms and paying all that money. But if you remember, a couple of months ago, Warner Bros. They tried to do a similar thing to the Adult Swim published titles, but fortunately that plan just got stopped in its tracks, because due to the amount of backlash and the developers of these titles voicing how they had no freaking idea this was going to happen, they decided to just not do that. So them just going straight up and and just taking these games off sale, learning to not announce what they're about to do with their games. But unfortunately, it's left a lot of these titles not being able to be obtained unless you have the physical copy or already have bought the game, or obviously, illegally. And it just goes back to all the things we grew up with being outdated, because didn't earlier this year, the Cartoon Network website where people used to go to play, the Flash games, that got shut down as well. So we don't even have that anymore. Now the games that you would buy and have their own like full-length titles are no longer available on PC, at least. It's some really sad shit, man. But even though Warner Bros is obviously a poster boy for these types of impromptu removal decisions, and we could just look to them and say that they're single-handedly doing the worst, this is obviously an issue that's going to be plaguing a lot of older IPs in the next couple of years, since licensing issues and just overall scheme of digital media rights being transferred to all these different people, and the fans getting the sharp end of the stick, since we might lose a title that we haven't archived, so we just lose that game forever. It's a really trash just predicament to be in, that unfortunately we have seen a lot of, and we're likely to see a lot more of in the next couple of years. But what can you do? But that's all I got for today, man. If you enjoyed, like on the video, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.